3,800 years, an amount of time that is unimaginable to most. In that amount of time, everything we know has been created. In that amount of time, great societies have risen and fallen. The Romans, the Greeks, the Mayans, the Aztecs, all of those societies have existed in that amount of time. And that amount of time is simply the amount of time that the Great Pyramids have stood as the tallest man-made structure. So is it any wonder that these Great Pyramids, dating back over 4,000 years old to 2,580 BC, have so much mystery and intrigue surrounding them?
Today, I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to show you guys the Great Pyramids, talk about some of the truths that we know, some of the conspiracy theories involving the Great Pyramids, and try and dispel some of the rumors that can easily be dispelled. And there are some conspiracy theories that really do interest me, that really do play at me, that really do make me believe. But there's a lot that just a little bit of research can easily dispel it. So let's get into it. The first off, and probably the most fringe conspiracy theory, the one that most of you guys probably clicked this video for, are ancient aliens, okay? So the Great Pyramids of Giza are these incredible creations. You can see them from space. If you're on the desert plain looking at them, you can see them from so far away, it's crazy. They rise above Cairo. They rise above it all. And even today, they rise above it all. Now, back then, these structures were magnificent. They're greater than anything ever created of the time, and probably within 2,000 years of the time. There's blocks that weigh 80 tons in the Great Pyramids of Giza. There are weird tunnel-like structures, and no mummies have ever been found. So what is the purpose of these pyramids? We're going to get into the mummies later because that one's an interesting one. But what are the purpose of these pyramids? Could they not be a call out to our celestial neighbors? A call out to those who are flying above us? A call out to God? Well, maybe they are. Maybe the Great Pyramids were created to call out to a being greater than us, to call out to someone iconized and held above all else. But who? Ancient aliens, of course. That's the answer. And that is what a lot of conspiracy theorists would have you believe. But the truth is, when I say God in the heavens, what do you think? You think above. You think up high. You think up celestially. Now, the Egyptians believed the same thing. They did have the underworld, and they did have crossing the Nile and all sorts of beliefs of their own. But the heavens would be above, and even the ancient Egyptians would think this way. So when you think of God and heaven and all of that being above, maybe the pyramids are just a call out to them. Maybe they're seen from space, not because they were meant to, call out to some great aliens in space, but because they were meant to call out to the gods who are believed to exist in space. It would make sense. And there are some other sort of theories, okay? A lot of people say that the pyramids were made to conduct electricity. Well, this could be true of anything, right? Anything that is that old could be coated in copper and used to conduct electricity. It's that simple. Would lightning strike the pyramids? Maybe it would. But does that necessarily mean that the Egyptians are using it to power their cities? I doubt it. There's a lot of compelling theories about how the pyramids could have been used, but I could make the same reference to anything in modern day. Take the Empire State Building. Back in its day, it was the tallest building. How do we know it wasn't used to conduct electricity? Well, we know because there are people that were alive then, and they talked, and they all told us, hey, that's not what it was used for, and we know. But the Great Pyramids are so old, all those people, all those memories, all that history has been lost to time. So it's very easy to guess and create premises around potential uses for them. But the fact is, any building could be used to conduct electricity, and in the event of a lightning strike, many buildings do conduct electricity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's some great conspiracy or great technology involved around those buildings. Now, there's no real... So this is a problem. This is a problem with arguing aliens and ancient civilizations. There's no one argument for it. For every argument I dispel, there's another argument that's crazier and based on less facts, and some of the facts aren't even true. For instance, one of the ones that everybody always references is that the Great Pyramids do not have any mummies in them. There were no bodies found. There's no one buried there. So how could they be a burial ground? What do you find in a burial ground? You find bodies, but there were no bodies. interesting, right? And it really is. It really is. But here's a few facts. In Egypt, there are 120 pyramids found without mummies. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking even better. No, not even better. You see, back in the day, the Egyptians had a problem with grave looting, a problem that we have even today. And now imagine if such an immense amount of wealth was held in these pyramids. And now imagine if those mummies are extremely valuable too. People were going into pyramids and they were stealing bodies. As bad as it sounds, it's true. They were stealing these mummies. They were stealing these holy artifacts. They were stealing things that were supposed to accompany these people into the afterlife. So, as a good Egyptian who holds these kings and queens above all else, especially a king or queen buried in the Great Pyramid, because this represents the pinnacle of your society, to them, this is their empire state building. This is their monument to their society. This is their monument of greatness. And the people who created that monument are in that monument, okay? Crazy, but it's true. Now, what they did is they took all the bodies and they moved them to the Valley of the Kings. They did this to keep looters in check and to make it harder to steal from these pyramids. That is why the pyramids are empty. That's why there's no sort of bodies in the pyramids. A lot of people argue this. A lot of people say that, well, if there's no bodies, how could it be true? And there's all sorts of crazy voids and things being discovered in the pyramids. And this is true. There are unopened areas of many pyramids. And one of the reasons is because we're so careful about our history nowadays. There's so little history left for us to look back on that we want to make sure that what we can look back on, we preserve. And that's why it takes so long to go into these pyramids. In 2017, they discovered through a scan the big void, okay? No one knows what this is. It's a huge void inside of the pyramids. It was previously unidentified, but using modern day technology, they were able to find it. What the purpose of this void is, what is hidden inside of it is unknown to us right now. Or at least as far as my research found, it's unknown to us. But there's going to be more truths to come. There's going to be more things to be found, and there's going to be more craziness to be discovered, and I really can't wait for that. But the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, they were likely burial rooms for the king and the queen. The tunnels used to access them, the great chamber or the grand gallery, those again were for the king and queen, because anything in those pyramids accompanied them into the afterlife, or at least that is the belief. These pyramids needed to be grand. They needed to be a symbol of what these people stood for, of what their society stood for. And that is sort of why you get what you're looking at. That's why the pyramids go up. That's why the tunnels were designed the way they were. Originally, they were designed to keep looters from going into them, but then looters got better and better, and looters got more and more cunning, and eventually they did have to move the bodies. That's what we do nowadays. If you think about a grave that's been sort of desecrated time and time again, graves that are people attempt to dig up, what eventually happens? Those graves are moved out of respect for the person in them. The ancient Egyptians did the same thing. Further proof of this is that the current tunnel the tourists use to go into the Great Pyramid was a robber's tunnel. It's a tunnel that was used probably around 820 AD with a battering ram to sort of cut through all the masonry on the Great Pyramids and get into various passageways to steal from the pyramids. The fact that this tunnel exists proves that there were grave robbers, there were problems, and it proves that the ancient Egyptians saw these problems and they took steps to fix it. So, the next thing everybody's going to say with aliens, okay, especially, is how come there's pyramids in so many countries? And you guys are thinking like, well, what do you mean? Well, there's pyramids in Egypt, Sudan, Nigeria, Greece, Spain, China. All these are connected, but there's also pyramids in North America. There's pyramids in India. There's pyramids all over the world. Indonesia, Peru. We can go on and on. Las Vegas. Las Vegas doesn't count because, well, we all know how that was built. Anyways, all over the world there's these pyramids. No matter where you go, you're going to find pyramids. Like I said, if you're in the U.S. or you're in North America, you've probably been to the Pyramid of the Moon, or maybe you've been to the Pyramid of the Moon that's located in Mexico. If you're in Asia, maybe you've seen Prastom, that's a temple in Cambodia. I really want to visit that one. If you've been to Indonesia, you've probably seen ancient pyramids as well. If you've been to Spain, there's some pyramids. And if you're a true adventurer and you've been to Sudan or Nigeria, you're going to see pyramids that closely resemble those of ancient Egypt. Although these pyramids are much, much smaller, you're going to still see those pyramids. So why? Why are there pyramids all over the world when we didn't have telephones? We couldn't just ring up our neighbor over in South America and go, hey, dude, I found this awesome thing. It's like you build a pyramid and all these aliens come. You couldn't just call them and do that, right? And nobody sounded like that. Anyways, you couldn't just do that. So why are there pyramids? The reason there's pyramids is because those are the simplest structures to create if you're looking to get height. Now, if you create 4 walls, okay, you keep building up, you keep building up, you keep building up, eventually they collapse. If those walls collapse inwards, you get a pyramid-looking appearance, and those walls will be stable if they all collapse at the same time. Now, ancient Egyptians, they had a lot of time. They had thousands of years to work on building structures, and at some point, every society discovers that pyramids are these amazing structures that sort of collapse in on themselves and allow you to build up, way up. Like way up, like the Great Pyramids, like 3,000 years of the tallest building in the world being a pyramid. Pyramids are crazy. They allow us to do things that we can only replicate with modern architecture. They couldn't build skyscrapers back then, but pyramids they could build. So that's why everybody built pyramids, because that's the easiest way to go up, especially if you're creating stairs. Like think of your staircase, right? Like that's sort of a pyramid. If you put 4 staircases together, you put them all right, like you're going to get a pyramid. And to reach the gods, you want to go up. You want to reach the heavens. You want to go as high as possible to get as close to God as you can. So you're going to build a pyramid because that's sort of the largest structure you can build. So I believe that's sort of why the Great Pyramids are all pyramids and why there's all that matching. Now, some people will tell you it's the ancient aliens. Ancient aliens communicated with the Mayans, the Aztecs. I don't even know what the name of the tribe is in Asia, but communicated with them, communicated with the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Greeks, the Romans, everybody. Maybe even the guys who built that pyramid in Vegas. Ancient aliens communicated with them. Or modern aliens, I guess. But it's simply not true. It's simply not true. The pyramids are just the easiest ways to build up. And whether aliens were involved or not, I don't know. But I don't think you need to communicate to realize these facts. Also, keep in mind that all these pyramids were not built at the same time. It's not like 2550 BC, everybody started their pyramid project. If that happened, now you've got something. But this happened over thousands of years, okay? And every civilization had a different take on the pyramids. As you guys saw in those pictures that were just flying by your screen. Not all the pyramids looked the same, but they were all pyramids. They were all pyramids. So, yeah, that's why all societies use pyramids. At least that's my take on it. Now, the next thing a lot of people are going to reference is that there were tons. These blocks weighed 15 tons on average. Some of them weighed as much as 80 tons. How do you move that? Well, that is an immense task. That's a task that would take tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers. And the ancient Egyptians had that. In fact, their society was at the height when they built these pyramids. Maybe their society fell because they spent too many resources building pyramids. Who knows? But they had enough people to move that much weight. They can devise systems using rollers and logs and just various things to get these blocks transported to the pyramids and up on top of the pyramids. Was it an easy task? No. Did a lot of people die doing this? Yes. But that, again, doesn't mean that aliens were involved. Maybe they were. It would be a lot easier if aliens came around and sort of helped them build the pyramids, but it would be a lot easier if the aliens came around and helped me build my house or helped us build the latest church or helped us build, well, anything. But they don't. And if you imagine someone coming back to Earth 1,000 years later and looking at sort of the Empire State Building or something that has remained pristine, has not fallen, they might think that aliens built it, but the truth is that humans are ingenious, humans are creative, and we don't give our ancient ancestors nearly enough credit. If you look at some of the things that were built, it is mind-blowing. Now, all right, we've covered the ancient aliens. I know that got a little long, but I'd like to go into a few other theories, some that hold a little bit more water. one of the theories is the Orion correlation theory. Now, this theory states that the pyramids line up with Orion's belt, the constellation of Orion. And the reason that this is because the ancient Egyptians knew about this constellation, and they related it to the god of rebirth and afterlife. So why would they not line up their pyramids with this constellation? Now, if you put the stars and the pyramids over each other, and then you sort of shrink and increase different maps, right? Like if you make the stars a little bit bigger than they should be, and you make the pyramids a little bit bigger than they should be, everything sort of lines up. The stars are just barely going to touch the tips. You line one star up exactly with the pyramid, the other stars just barely touch the tips of all the other pyramids. Now, it is actually some decent evidence, right? Like everything lines up correctly, but it could just be a coincidence. It could just be luck. We don't know. And the lineup isn't so perfect that I zoom this map out, I zoom this image out, I look at it and say, oh my God. If you pull the whole Earth together, you lie Orion's constellation over it, it matches perfectly. No, it's if you zoom everything in and you really like sort of equate everything, it does match up. It's impressive, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So now what I want to talk about is sort of the most compelling theory that I ran into, and that is that the Sphinx and the pyramids are actually older than we thought. So one of the issues with the pyramids is that we can't date them. There's nothing inside of the pyramids that is datable. Rocks, stones, everything like that, they are man-made. So there's no date that we can put to them. So these stones could be way older than we think, okay? Now, what some people have hypothesized is that these pyramids were built 10,000 years ago. Or not 10,000 years ago, sorry, they were built in 10,500 BC or 12,000 years ago. Now, why specifically do they say that? At that time, there are some other artifacts. There are some other things that sort of indicate that societies back then might have been a little bit greater than societies farther into the future, okay? So a society 10,000 years old had certain technologies that some societies 4,000 years old didn't have. And that's how human technologies work. There's always been things that we know, like societies come up with. They rise, they fall, and some of their inventions are just lost to time. So why 10,000 years? And why do people think that this is a date? Well, the big thing is the Sphinx and erosion. If you look at how the pyramids, and specifically the Sphinx, has eroded, you note that there's some water erosion. You note that there's a level of erosion that you would not expect from something that's sitting in the desert. Now, granted, there are winds in the desert. Those winds are going to batter these things with sand, and that is going to erode. But on the Sphinx specifically, you see a type of erosion that you associate with waterfall or rainfall. Now, if the Sphinx was 2,500 years old, or from 2,500 BC, that would be 4,500 years old. But if the Sphinx is that old, then the water erosion should not be possible. But if you date that Sphinx back to 10,000 years old, the water erosion starts to make sense. It starts to line up, and that's interesting. But now, here's sort of the crux where everybody gets all out of shape. If the Sphinx is that old, how could it be made to represent a pharaoh? Specifically, Pharaoh Khafre, I believe that's how it's pronounced. That is sort of what the Sphinx is designed to represent. That's what everybody says. How could the Sphinx represent the pharaoh if it's that old? Well, here's the thing. If you look at the Sphinx, you're going to see that it's got these ears on it, okay? And then the face. And if you look at the ears, you look at the face, you can see how if those ears were protruded out, you could almost get a feline, cat-like feature out of the Sphinx. And it would be pretty easy for a master carver or a master craftsman to come in and carve that up to create a Sphinx with the face of a pharaoh. And I believe that that is one theory of what might have happened. 4,500 years ago, someone commissioned a great craftsman to create the pharaoh in the likeness, or create the Sphinx in the likeness of a pharaoh. And they did this by basically cutting back the Sphinx's face and putting on it the face of a pharaoh. If you look at the Sphinx, if you look at the face, if you look at pictures of it, you can sort of see how that could have worked. You can see how just the cuts are more jagged, and then the face has so much detail articulated on it. How could this be? Why does the face have so much more detail than some of the other stuff? And I think this is actually a compelling argument. It's a compelling argument that the Sphinx is looking so different on the face than it does sort of in the body, because someone came and they touched it up. Someone came and created this pharaoh-like image out of the Sphinx. The Sphinx existed many, many years before this ancient society came along, or the ancient Egyptians came along. They saw it. They created their temples, and they created all this stuff around the Sphinx because it was this magnificent creation. And then a pharaoh came along, and he said, I want that creation to have my face. He hired a craftsman, paid him what he had to pay. The craftsman came along, created the face, and then, that's that. That's how you get the face of a pharaoh on something that's over 10,000 years old. There has been a lot of argument about this. There's a lot of historians who would say that this is wrong. There's a lot of historians that are suggesting alternate sort of methods of erosion that are definitely possible. And that's the thing. It's very hard to prove either way. It's very hard to prove when the Sphinx is created. There's many historians who will give these guys the fact that the Sphinx is older than the pharaoh who commissioned his face to be carved on the Sphinx, or the pharaoh whose face is on the Sphinx. But then they'll say at the same time that, well, who knows how old it is? It doesn't have to be 10,000 years old. It could be something from ancient Egypt before they created the pyramids. Because one of the things people forget is to create a society big enough to create the pyramids, you need a long runway, especially in ancient times. You need to be able to get through times of famine. You need to create a major trade port. You need to create armies. You need to create castles. Or not castles, but you need to create a city. And that takes a lot of time. So Could the ancient Egyptians have created the Sphinx 1,000 years before the pyramids? Maybe. It's definitely possible. It's very hard to prove anything. So here's sort of what we know, okay? Everybody agrees that wind erosion did play a part. The Sphinx does not look like it did, 4,000 years ago, just like the pyramids. There's erosion. It happens over time, and it has occurred to both these structures. Now, some people will say that the Sphinx is worn. Like, there are signs of water erosion, but they'll also say that these signs of water erosion date back to before the Sphinx was carved. Now, if you're carving something as great as the Sphinx and you have a natural formation, the Sphinx is carved into a rock that already existed there. So when they're carving the Sphinx, maybe the natural formation, the natural curvature of these rocks matched what the artist was going for, so he left it in there. That could be one reason why you'd see the erosion, but you couldn't date the Sphinx. So you could say the erosion's 10,000 years old, but then the Sphinx was carved 2,500 or 4,000 years ago, and the erosion just existed through that. It's one of those great mysteries, and it's one of those things that I don't think we're ever going to solve, because there's so many ways that it could have been. And I don't think it's necessarily that an ancient society existed in ancient Egypt. Well, an ancient society other than the ancient Egyptians. But it definitely is proof that there is a mystery out there, that there's still something to be solved. And it proves that even if you throw out some of the more out there, outlier theories of aliens and crazy technology and electrically charged cities and pyramids and everything like that, there's still a mystery. There's still something to be discovered. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because I don't know the truth. I just wanted to give you guys the facts and sort of shed some light on the pyramids and some of the stuff, or the conspiracies and thoughts surrounding them, because they really are a truly great structure. Anyways, thank you for watching.